Welcome back to AgriTalk. Today we are talking about parasitism, and with me in studio is Dr. David Obiero, who is a lecturer at Masai Mara University. And before we took the break, Dr. you were telling us what farmers need to do to prevent these parasites from getting into their farms. But I'm trying also to understand, apart from just the ruminants, let's say the birds, they have they're called, what are they? They are not ticks in particular for the birds.
Birds.
Yes.
They have.
They have ticks.
Yes, they have what we call the soft ticks here, but they have.
Okay. So how do they prevent them, or how do they come to the farm if you didn't have them in the first place, and how do you prevent those ones?
So you find that these parasites also, they have what they call a state in their life before they now become adults, where they can actually exist in the environment, what we call like a free living state. So you find that these ticks, they normally find them they will be in their surrounding environment, in the grass. So you'll find that mostly their development will be incomplete if they do not access the animal. They need to suck on they need to get nutrients from the animal, like the blood and other fluids, so that they can be able to reach sexual maturity, to multiply. So they'll be lying dormant. They'll be lying dormant somewhere in the grass, and they can live for a very long time. They will wait for you to set up your poultry house, and then they will walk all the way to your poultry house, so that they can access. They're actually drawn by, like ticks are drawn by carbon dioxide from these animals. So it's actually like a trigger for them to be able to know where they are, so that they can continue their life cycle.
Okay.
So the situation is very similar even for birds. You will find that at least nowadays, you find that people now know how make their housing such that it's very uncomfortable for them. Like for the dairy example, you find that the structures nowadays, they make them from metal, so it makes it very uncomfortable for animals to hide around corners. There are no corners. It's very easy to maintain, and discourages them making houses there, for them to be able to hide there. Similarly, for poultry, you find that the design of the houses actually can help to create hiding spaces for these parasites.
Okay.
So as they are moving from the grass, they can hide there, wait for your poultry, and actually attach themselves so that they can continue with their life cycle.
Okay. Other farm animals contribute to this spread of especially parasites like ticks and mites. And when I talk about other animals in the farm, I talk about dogs, that sometimes they just roam around and you never know what they pick. How do you control such?
It's a good point that you have brought, and it's an area that sometimes gets overlooked. But you'll find that actually in most farms, there's always a dog somewhere. So you find that the interesting bit is that there are some parasites that have the adult stage of their life in dogs, but an intermediate stage in the ruminants. So for example, there are worms, they are like the tapeworm, whereby the dog will get the adult worm, it will shed the tapeworm in the pasture, and now as the cows eat, the cows will now take up the worms and now develop cysts within their organs. So when you go to now, the animal is being slaughtered, you find that particular areas are being condemned because of that in particular. You find that particular, like the liver, lungs, such particular organs become wasted. And the long time, of course, you get an economic loss because of that. Okay. And of course, now having the dog and having the ruminants in the same space, and having the dog having a high worm burden that is of that particular species, is of very significant concern, because there are some worms that within the dog, you'll find that there's no much clinical signs, but now within the human being can also be an intermediate host. For example, the one that I've mentioned, it causes hydatid cysts or hydatidosis. You find that what will happen in the cow or in the cattle is similarly will happen in the tissue of the person. So if by mistake somebody was to contaminate his food items with the worms from the dog, the eggs, the person will consume those tissue parts, and the worm will develop inside the body of the person, and that is a particular actually a very fatal disease, and it's part of the what we call parasitic zoonotic diseases.
Okay.
So you find that it's a good thing that you brought it. You find that it's when a vet goes to these places, it not just focus on the cow, but if there's a dog, you can extend this information that if you're doing deworming for all the animals in the farm, include your dog in that process, because as you might be focusing on worms that are of particular importance to milk and things like that, but you are actually breeding something else that might be harmful to the family directly.
So in terms of control measures, what are the control measures to both external and the internal parasites, and how often should farmers do this?
Okay, for external, you'll find that husbandry management helps for external. You will find that once the farmer has dealt with the housing and husbandry related issues, whereby, for example, if it's a dairy unit, it has a mesh that prevents flies from coming in, mosquitoes, whether the structure prevents animals getting access to maybe water bodies that might have high mosquito burdens. The housing management helps. The husbandry management helps. For internal, like I mentioned before, is more broad, whereby you will have both the husbandry measures will be of help, whereby the design of the house, reducing pile-up of manure, good drainage, reduces the build-up of worms, coccidian parasites, flies, which is external. You have, of course, the husbandry-related issues is also nutrition, builds up the immunity, makes it very difficult for parasites to build a home inside the animal. We, of course, also have the issues of the genetics. If the person can be very conscious, very intentional on, I stay in this area has a history of this particular parasites, I'm going to look for an animal with a genetics that is going to be helpful, that is going to be resistant, or even if there's an infection, my losses are not going to be significant. So they can be very intentional also, the genetics. And of course, there is also the drugs that are there. With the farmer, they'll be able to come up with a plan, a hard health plan. We do not want to always come in when the animal is sick. We don't want to see the farmers when the animals are sick. We want to work for a plan that will prevent them from becoming sick in the first place. So it involves a hard health routine, whereby in a particular time of the year, the animals are conducted particular procedures, whether it involves vaccination, whether it involves deworming, whether it involves ectoparasiticides. And this normally we like to advocate for having a strategic approach to them, not having a generic one whereby you just do every 6 months or every 3 months. But since this is your investment, this is your farm, you can be interested to look at how does each and every individual animal look like. You can, with your vet, you can take the fecal samples, do an analysis and come up with the worm burden of each and every animal. Now with that, he can best advise how frequently to administer the medicine. And of course, this is tied to the type of production system you have. The frequency of administering medicine for an animal that doesn't move out of the stall is very different from the one that is going to be left to roam in pasture.
So when it comes to, I know I've seen in a lot of farms, especially those with dairy animals, they spray their animals often. Is there a period or a cycle of time when they should be sprayed?
You will find that normally we do what we call a strategic application of those drugs, whereby some target either the beginning or the end of rainy season. But normally you find that we do not like to give a blanket. Normally it will be best when you work with your vet. because you'll find that in particular areas, you find that there are ticks that have become resistant to particular drugs. So when you're in that particular area, you won't just be giving a recommendation that you from another area that you just come from. You'll find that normally the county veterinary officer will know that in this area we are in this generation of drugs. If there's a resistance has been reported, so we are using this particular one. So normally there's a body of information that informs that.
Okay.
What brings problems is that one for doing a blanket, repeating what you did in Limuru, going to Kitengela, doing the same thing. You might create what we call resistance, because there is a reported resistance for both the ectoparasites, like the ticks, and also for the worms. So this information normally you find that the county veterinary officer is very much informed, even the private ones. So they work together to best give the most recent and most effective information.
Okay. So what are some of the economic dangers of not dealing with these parasites on time or following the procedures you've just enumerated?
So you find that the most dramatic thing that a farmer will see maybe is death. For example, there are worms in sheep that will cause death in a very short period of time. But if he was to look at his books, you will find that there is a silent loss. There is a loss that he might not be picking up that is due to those animals. Mm-hmm. There will be a reduced production. If it's chicken, it will be reduced production of eggs. If it's dairy, milk. If it's somebody who deals with beef cattle in a range, you will find that there will be the weight of the animals at sale will be low. When it comes to, so you'll find that those production parameters might be silent, but they are actually very expensive. You find that you'll actually be getting less for your investment. And that is actually the greatest economic loss of the parasites.
Okay. In terms of when it comes to this information getting to the farmers, especially what you've just mentioned, how easy is it for these farmers to get this information? Because I know most of our farmers are not, they not call as you said earlier, they don't call the vet often. They only call the vet when there's a problem. So where do they get all this information?
What I would advise, in every county, the Kenya Veterinary Fraternity has done very well in terms of, in every county you'll find that there is a county veterinary office. It is actually a very good resource of information. There is always a veterinarian that will be able to advise in terms of the best, all the way from the structures to disease control, advice on markets if it's available, but you'll find that these officers are there. Most of the time they're next to near the chief's office, other administrative, within the administrative block of the counties, there's always a veterinary office. Mm. Yes. And of course, you'll find that they might not be able to be your local vet, but they will advise you that in this county we have these vets. They'll provide you a list, and from there you can now interact within the environment, just like with any other service provider.
Okay. Are there pests that have ever been eradicated from a particular place? I remember when it comes to diseases, some time back they eradicated rinderpest. Are there pests that have ever been eradicated from a region?
None. Rinderpest was our first. It was the equivalent of our smallpox. For veterinary, that is our win so far. We are trying to work on another virus that is very related to rinderpest, but in terms of parasites, I don't think so. And it's also a balance. You know, we do not want to create a sterile environment whereby these things don't exist. No. We want to be able to have a harmony with them, whereby they are not creating losses, but they are just priming the immunity of these animals, such that the animals have an effective immunity, but not cause overt disease whereby you're not getting into losses. Okay. Because of course, us as vets also don't exist in a vacuum. There is also the ecosystem, because you know when you come and just apply these drugs anyhow, you'll be killing even useful bees, you'll be killing useful arthropods, useful worms like earthworms. So it's very selective, and it's also with the awareness that we are in an ecosystem and we need to be, it interacts, and what we do within the domestic setup affects also the environment, the wild animals, the wild flies, the wilds, and we do not want to destroy them because they share very many systems. What is effective in the mosquito that is harming your animal will probably be effective in a harmless one or in a bee, and you do not want to be that.
Okay. When it comes to deworming, is there a regime of how often a farmer needs to deworm? And are there very stubborn parasites that are of codomic danger to the farmer if they don't take care of or they don't deworm on a regular basis?
Yes, you'd find that there's the generic one, but where people say you deworm maybe after every 3 months. But as I mentioned earlier, that is taken with a pinch of salt. Normally, a vet will be able to actually decide on when to deworm your farm based on the individual characteristics of each animal. They will go to each animal, be able to collect samples and see whether the load is high in this one. Does this one need to be dewormed? Yes or no? The other one, because in the past there used to be that one whereby we looked at the worm problem as a hard problem. But now with the scientific literature, we are now looking at deworming even at the individual level, so that you avoid those issues we mentioned of resistance, overdosing and resistance. And with regards to stubborn worms in sheep, there's a particular worm that is very stubborn, that causes many losses, and is the one that you mentioned earlier, that if possible you go for a particular breed that is resistant to it, like the red Maasai is resistant to the Himonkas worm. The Himonkas worm is very stubborn, very difficult to get rid of when it gets into your farm, and confers very high economic losses.
Okay. I know you've mentioned, from the beginning of this conversation, we've kept talking about the vet. How important is a vet to a farmer?
The vet to a farmer is the equivalent of, it's like when you're doing this business, it's like a second wife. When you're doing livestock, it's like a second wife. You need to work, even before you get the animals, you need to have the vet on board. He will help you in all manner within that value chain, because in our training we have competence across all those levels, from the beginning, during structure design, looking for the pastures, when the animal comes, all the way to when the animal or the products are supposed to go across outside your farm. And we also have experts now that are now focused on the different value chains in terms of value addition, and so that you can be able to get the most from your animals, and also have fun when you're doing it in terms of meat. It needs to bring you also joy.
Okay. So we know, we always say most of our farmers are aging, and sometimes I wonder if they really get this information. Is there, what do you think? Is it possible to introduce some of these things earlier to all of us, not just because you want to do veterinary medicine, is when you start learning these things? Is it possible, or do you think it is important to introduce this to even our young kids in primary school, and let them know what is a tick, what is a tapeworm, what is it, and how to prevent them?
I believe it's important, because if you look at the statistics in terms of the GDP contribution of livestock is very significant. So it means that this country relies a lot on agriculture and livestock-based agriculture also. So you find that it's a very interesting disconnect, in that the contribution of agriculture is very huge, but maybe the emphasis does not come out as strongly. So I agree with you. It should be made interesting. They should be introduced to it earlier, so that it creates interest. It creates interest because they are the ones who will be able to be able to be the breadbasket for the future in terms of their contribution. Because I believe still agriculture is a very strong component of the economy.
Okay. So why do you think most of our farmers don't really like working with a vet? Why is it a little bit difficult to? to have your own vet that comes even when you don't call them? They just pass by every time, particular circle.
That is a good question that I might not have maybe all the answers, but from my experience, because I've also practiced privately for a while, you'll find that there is an awareness bit, because even amongst my friends, you'll find that after I went to veterinary school is when they realized, you mean there are people like veterinarians exist? You find that maybe we also need to we need to call ourselves into a meeting and also find ways of creating better visibility. Because vets in this country are not many. We are probably less than 4,000. It's a very huge country. So you find that sometimes we do not announce ourselves as much as we should. But it's something that I believe we have this very new crop that is very enthusiastic, and we should be able to take up the challenge.
Okay. Do you think also the size of our land and the animals, the number of animals we keep contribute to this? Because a farmer will say, I have 2 cows. Why should I have a vet who comes here to just look at my cow and give me a bill at the end of the month?
Those are the type of people you need to convince them of the value addition of having a vet coming in to see those 2 cows. Because essentially that is the entire structure. What you describe is the entire structure of essentially, like, for example, the dairy in this country. Small scale farmers, but very many, contribute like 70% of the milk we have as our output. But it is very easy to convince that farmer with simple arithmetic of the value of having a vet on board, with regards to having those animals stay with them for longer and get maximum outputs.
Okay.
There's a very clear cost benefit. Yes.
In terms of, there's a very important group of this community who also keep a large number of animals, the pastoralists. Do they still have to follow the same procedure when it comes to controlling these parasites, both internal and external?
Yeah, they essentially have the same animals, so the same rules apply. But you'll find them that the situation might be slightly different to them, because you'll find it's rare that they keep animals in a zero grazing unit, for example. So we find that probably most of their issue will be because of when they move, they interact with new ticks that have never probably. So if you had managed to control ticks in particular area, they move to a new area, so they get reinfected. So reinfection is very high when you're talking about those particular type of farmers.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, also you'll find that with time, with the way the type of animals they've kept traditionally, you find that the animals that they keep are also slightly more resistant to the effect of this animal, of this particular parasites. But the effects are still there. It's a particular area of the population that is challenging, but I think there are innovative ways of getting through them.
Okay. What are some of the common diseases that are brought by these parasites?
So, for example, for ticks, for example, you find that one that farmers resonate with easily is, like, for example, East Coast fever. It's a tick-borne disease. So you get the tick transmits a particular parasite, and the parasite now is the one that will cause clinical disease. So the farmer will call it not because of the tick, but because of the parasite that has been transmitted by the tick. Yes.
Okay. So going forward, what do you think are the things we need to do, or what as a country, to ensure that we help our farmers fix some of these things?
So of course, because the country has a structure in place, so it will be essentially to empower these particular offices with regards to infrastructure, resources. Because you might find that you have a vet office, but maybe it's only one vet in a very big span of the county is huge. You'll find that there are opportunities there, because this is the backbone of the country essentially. You find that to empower those particular offices, those spaces, is going to be very helpful to reaching the farmers in those remote areas. Because as I mentioned, the number is very low of the vets, and the ones now that are working for the government are even fewer. So you find that, and they're also aging. So you'll find that there is need to look into building those particular resources. Yes.
Okay. Now that agriculture is a devolved function, we know there is the county government and there is the national government. Do you think both these governments are doing enough to? You talked about the low numbers of vets, and I want to believe there are particular counties that may have even very few vets, and there are some that may have a lot of vets. Is there a way they can help balance this distribution?
There have been some good, of course, the numbers, it will be helpful if the numbers increased in terms of employment. But also, we also need to appreciate some wins. Like, for example, they've now introduced the internship. The internship gives a very good opportunity to spread vets, at least for that 1 year. They can be deployed in so many areas to supplement, to help. As they are learning, they become an extra hand in all these areas. But of course, this is rotational. Every year, of course, we have graduates. So that is a very strong positive that has been operationalized by the government. But of course, the critical mass still needs to be reached, because the number of vets per animal, as you mentioned, is still not proportionate.
Okay. As we wind up, what advice will you give to these young men, young people who are looking for courses and thinking of what to do in life? What advice would you give them to either join and become a vet? Because most of them think being a vet is a dirty job, and they don't want to be part of it.
I would encourage them to join the veterinary profession. They should know that there is the fraternity is growing and is very enthusiastic and it's very vibrant. And people will always need food. We are at the particular area whereby a need that is always going to be there. So the jobs will always be there. Unless people can stay without food, I think the profession should always find ways of growing.
Okay. Does it pay well? Because I think that's one thing.
That's why I'm here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ari, for sparing time to be with us today. I'm sure our viewers have learned a lot about parasitism and what they need to know. And I'm sure going forward, we will see more implementation of what you've told us today. For our viewers back at home, that is it from AgriTalk today. Until next time, goodbye.